Hey everybody, what's up? I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about Mla Style Citation. That's what you'll have to use for your third essay. What is Mla Citation? Well, MLA stands for the Modern Language Association. And that's just an organization, mostly of English professors, and they've come up with a way to document academic research. And they issue guidelines on how to do that. The purpose of doing this is so that the reader of your essay can reconstruct the research you did in your essay if they need to. Okay, so it really entails a style of in-text citation for when you use quotations and paraphrases. And then there's bibliographic citation on the last page, which is called the Works Cited page. So I highly recommend this resource. You have your little Penguin handbook that talks about this too. But Purdue Owl, if you Google Purdue Owl Mla, you'll come to this site, and this is maintained by Purdue University. So follow along with me here. So if you go to their page, right, Purdue Online Writing Lab, that's the OWL, and you scroll and it tells you about MLA formatting and style, talks about how to create a works cited page, and it shows, these different ways to format things. Like, so if you're trying to figure out how to format a book, you go there. A periodical, that means like a magazine or a journal, you'd go there. Quite importantly is the Mla Sample Paper. I've got that open on the next screen, and I think that is probably the best way to introduce you to some of this. Okay, so here is that sample paper. Now, this will explain to you how to format your essay in accord with MLA style. Notice the page numbers. It says, Angeli 2. That's the author's last name, so your last name and the page number in the upper right-hand corner. But let's go down to when this writer begins to use some quotations. All right. So here's one. This is a paper about farming, obviously. It says, the writer writes, one of these improvements was the development of canals and steamboats, which allowed farmers to sell what has previously been unsaleable and resulted in a, quote, substantial increase in a farmer's ability to earn income, end quote. Notice that there's no period right there at the end of the sentence, just the end quotation mark. And then the citation, Danhoff 5. Well, who's Danhoff? Danhoff is the last name of the person who wrote the source where this person got these quotes from. Okay, and what's 5? Well, it's the page number in Danhoff's text where this quote comes from. Okay, and so that's called right there. That's called the in-text citation. The in-text citation. And you should always do that. So it goes last name, page number, in parentheses. Notice it does not say Danhoff, comma, 5. Notice it does not say Danhoff, P5, or page 5. It just says Danhoff, space, 5. Okay, so author, space, page number. After the quote, and then the period. See that there's the period right there? Then the period. Okay. Now, why is this here? What does this mean? Sick, right? Anything that's put into a quote, right, that isn't originally there should be in brackets. And this person has put sick in here. And what sick means is, hey, it looks like that might be a mistake in the quote, but that's actually how it was written. Okay, and he put sick there because of this word. Like, usually we would say unsellable, but in this text the person says it unsellable. And so our writer, Angeli, wanted to say, hey, I know that looks wrong, unsellable, but that's the way it was in this source. Okay, one thing I want to draw your attention to is notice that the sentence does not begin with the quotation, right? the sentence always begins with an introductory tag to the quotation, okay? And so that should always be the case. Never, ever begin a sentence with a quote. Always begin it with your words and then fit the quote into, your own sentence, okay? Now look down here. We see in brackets again, right, that this writer has changed something. Because the brackets indicate that our author, the main author of this whole paper, has changed something here. And he changed a word that was there to a farmer's. Well, we can guess what was there originally. I'll bet you in the source text it says a substantial increase in his ability to earn an income. But since this source right here, or rather, since these quotes don't name who that his would be, this person decided to take out his and add in a farmer's, right, so that it could be clear. Now, you need to document in text both quotations and paraphrases, okay? So a paraphrase is where you take something you learned in another source and put it into your own words, right? That's a paraphrase. It's okay to do that, but you need to document, where that is in your paper. So even if you just took what Danhoff said there and didn't use his exact words, but you changed it into your own words, you'd still have Danhoff 5 at the end of the sentence, okay? So, and we could scroll through and see, other places where there's different authors being cited. Look, here's a good example. Before 1820, the rural community accounted for 80% of consumption of farmers' goods, right? There's no quote in that sentence, so why is this here? Well, because the writer of our essay, Angeli, is acknowledging, yeah, I didn't know that, but I got it from Hurt 127, okay? And then after the first time, right, after you've named the person, if in the next sentence you're still working from that source, the next time you could just put the page number, But that's only if you're still working from the same source. If you jumped back to Danhoff here, you couldn't just use the page number, right? You'd have to write Danhoff again because the last person you'd used was Hurt, okay? Now, probably no more than about 10 to 15% of your essay should be quotes. So don't quote a whole paragraph. Ask yourself, is there a way that I could say that in my own words that's shorter, and then paraphrase it and put the citation, that indicates where you got the information from, okay? I also think that it's a very good practice to do this. See what this person does here? The writer of our essay is introducing a new source, and the first time he uses that source, he tells us what it is and who wrote it. So he says, in his published dissertation, The American Agricultural Press, 1819 to 1860, Albert Lowther Demery presents a, quote, description of blah, blah, blah. Notice that in the tag that begins the sentence before the quote, he tells us what source are we working from and who wrote it, right? Now, after this, the first time you use the source, you want to do that introduction. But after this, if down here, yeah, see, they do it, right? Next time, he doesn't introduce Demery again. He just says, or she says, Demery writes that Skinner's Periodical was the first continuous successful agricultural periodical in the United States. So once he's introduced Demery, or she, right, then it doesn't need an introduction again. You can just use the last name, okay? Now, why do we do this in text? Well, because at the end of our text, is this thing. Hold on. My computer's being slow. This thing. The Works Cited page. This tells your audience, here's all the bibliography means a book list, right? A list of information. So here's all the information where you could find all the sources that I used. So in other words, remember when we were looking at Danhoff? Let's say I'm your reader and I'm like, oh, Danhoff said that? Where can I find that? I think that's wrong. Then I'd look and see, oh, well, this person's getting it from Danhoff 5. Then I could go down here and find out, well, which Danhoff book are you using, right? Who published it? What year did they publish it, right? So I could go track that down myself. Notice there's a certain format here. Notice that it's double spaced, no extra space between entries. Notice that it's alphabetically organized by author's last name. So we got our A, our B, our D, right? It's organized that way. Notice that there's a certain order that the information is presented in. Author, title, press, year. Okay? And now I want to show you something else. So what you have to do, let's say you have to put it together. So I've got up here an article of mine, right, that I published. So let's say you have an article, a scholarly article, and you're trying to figure out, well, how am I going to format this thing for my Works Cited page? Well, let me show you, right? Let's go back to Purdue Owl. We'd go, periodicals. How do I cite a periodical, a work from a journal or a magazine? And we click that. Okay, and it tells you magazines, newspapers, scholarly journals, and then it tells you here's how you do an article in a magazine. Here's how you do an article in a newspaper. Here's, a review. Here's an article in a scholarly journal. That's what we're after right there. Hold on, let me see if I could get the whole field here. There we go. Yeah, so there's the way you do an article in a scholarly journal. Now look, there's the author's name. There's the title of the article. There is the title of the journal that this article was published in. There's the volume, the number, issue number, the year, and the pages that this article appears on in this book. Okay, so it tells you right here all of the information you need: author, title of article, title of journal, volume, issue, year, pages, and then you need to format that correctly. This is an important part of Essay 3 for our class. Now, let's go back to my article real quick. So here's the article. Well, now we need to figure out, right, what are those things? Well, here's our author, so it'd be L. Wanger A. Here's our title, right, the title of the text, Apology is Metanoic Performance, Punitive Rhetoric of Public Speech. What was this published in, right? Well, right here it says Rhetoric Society Quarterly, 42-4, right? So that's volume 42, issue 4, and there's the page numbers. You can also see this stuff on, here's like the actual page of the essay, the PDF. Right up here it says Rhetoric Society Quarterly, volume 42, number 4, pages blah, 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 and so you're going to need to find that information. Now, when it comes to your annotated bibliography for Essay 3, you need to find 5 academic sources that are related to your topic for the third essay. This is after I've approved it. And then you're going to write an annotated bibliography. All that means is a book list, right, with annotations. Annotations mean notes. So your annotated bibliography will look much like this, right, except after your first citation here, then you'd write a paragraph, a note, an annotation for this source. Then you'd give your second source, this source, and all the bibliographical information. And then you drop down here and write a paragraph about this source, right? So what questions does each annotation for each of your sources have to answer? Well, write this down. For your annotated bibliographies, for each academic source, you'll give the full bibliographic citation, just like it would appear on the Works Cited page. And then, for each source, write a paragraph of 6 to 8 sentences underneath each citation that answers these questions. What is the main argument of this particular source? How does it prove its claim? What evidence is used? Are there secondary claims that the text makes? How do you use this source in your essay? How will this source advance your argument? Can you detect any bias? Is there any reason to doubt? So that's what you need to do. Good luck.